Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast, a space to pause, breathe, and come back to yourself, even in the middle of a full and busy life. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and in each episode, we explore mindfulness for real life, simple practices, reflections, tools to help you feel grounded, present, and connected to what matters most to you. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. On today's sole episode, we're exploring the theme of what does it mean to get spiritually curious. According to Pew Research, 7 out of 10 people in the United States consider themselves spiritual, and some of that might overlap with actually participating in a specific religion. In general, about 22% of the population, according to Gallup research, says that people consider themselves spiritual but not religious. So today on the pod, we're going to talk about what does spirituality mean and how can we play with it and connect to it more in our daily modern lives. So wherever you are listening to this episode, on a walk, cooking in the kitchen, commuting, I welcome you to find your feet and let's get centered. If you asked me about 10 years ago, Wade, are you spiritual? I would kind of smirk at you and say, maybe? I remember specifically when my friend asked me this question. We were sitting in their living room, we were having a conversation about spirituality and religion and meditation. And for me at that point in my life, I did not consider myself spiritual, or I said like maybe spiritually light, meaning I had this belief that we were all connected and that there was a greater power in life. But when it came to my own practices, it felt very much like a solo practice. That when I was practicing meditation, I was needing this practice for my own mental health, my own anxiety management, my own healing. And I had these connotations like being spiritual meant you were kind of off your rocker, meant you were a little woo-woo, you were a little out there, you were speaking a different language or on a different dimension, or just disconnected from real life. And for me at that time, real life, having this like New Yorker mentality was the hustle and is like capitalism and money and time and what are you doing with yourself and purpose and action. And I remember being in certain trainings, whether it was trainings for my meditation practice or trainings for my coaching certification, where sometimes the facilitation was on the woo-woo side, where I was exposed to these guided practices that were more spiritual, were more connecting to God, quote unquote, or a higher power. And I had a really hard time understanding it, connecting to it, feeling motivated and deeply driven by it. And as I think back to when I was going through chemotherapy over 10 years ago, I don't feel like I was spiritual in the sense I was talking to God or a higher power, but I connected to the worshipness, the sacredness of my body, of life, of my heartbeat, of my cells, of all of the intricacies that are happening on the inside of my body, whether I'm paying attention to it or not. And so I really think looking back, spirituality was about connecting and worshiping my body, and not in an egotistical way or in a way that it needed to look a certain way, but in a way of just deeply honoring the miracle of life that is in our bodies. And how our bodies are this magical place that is always looking to create homeostasis. It's always looking for ways to come back to a baseline, to come back to safety, to come back to health and healing and optimization. After being in this career and this path for well over a decade, I feel that my spiritual practice has fully expanded, and I can, with my whole heart and body and soul, say, yeah, I'm fucking spiritual. And I'd like to say that I also think and hope I'm still very grounded in the way that I talk about spirituality and live life, because that's part of also my mission, is to keep my feet on the ground, to keep myself centered, and to allow myself to open up to the belief that there is a higher power out there. And for me, that looks like a combination of Mother Nature and something else, something bigger than myself. I wanted to record this episode because I think a lot of us are spiritually curious. And I think a lot of us also have this interesting relationship with, how do I label or identify myself? And so, what I hope you walk away with in today's episode is really this permission to be curious about your spirituality, is to notice. You don't have to have answers here, but can you awaken to the curiosity and let your curiosity lead you in your relationship to spirituality? Maybe you believe that there's something more, there's something bigger, there's something greater in life, but you don't know exactly what to believe. Or maybe you've moved away from religion, growing up, organized religion, but you're still craving a sense of meaning and connection, and want that to come from your own authentic beliefs versus a dogma being told to you. Or maybe you have your own meditation practice and that's opened up a door for you. Or maybe it's a yoga practice and that's opened up this space of curiosity of, what's going on the inside or outside of my body? Or what's this energy I feel, or this sense of connection to other people? Or maybe you don't even know if you consider yourself spiritual. You just know that there's something in you that's asking these bigger questions. Or maybe you think you should be asking these bigger questions. So, wherever you are on this curiosity spectrum, you are welcome here. I'm going to guide us through a series of questions to just sit with, to notice, maybe to walk with, to journal with, to support you tapping into that curiosity so that you can discover for yourself, what is your relationship with spirituality like? So, the first question here is to just note, like, what am I curious about? What do you notice you spend a lot of your time being curious about? Is it the weather? Is it eye connection with strangers? Are you curious about the body? Are you curious what kindness means, or how kindness is shown or lived in society? Are you curious how things in our world and nature and food get its color? Are you curious about the afterlife? What happens when we die, or what happens before we're born? Are you curious about intuition, memories, dreams? Are you curious how food grows? Are you curious how some people are more motivated than others, or how creativity is expressed? As you can see with me throwing out all of these areas, there's so much in life to be curious about. And so, can we give ourselves permission to just notice, like, how am I curious in my life? Maybe what books do I tend to gravitate towards, or types of podcasts, or insightful conversations? What do I research in my spare time? What do I ponder while I'm on a walk by myself in the park, in the woods? For me, I think one of the practices where curiosity came alive and opened up my relationship to spirituality was when I was on retreat for the first time on a silent meditation retreat. I started to notice how much grief was in my heart, in my body. And that grief really opened me up. Getting curious about the grief opened me up to being able to connect with my mother, who has passed away. It's been 16 years now. She's hasn't been on this earth. And starting to get curious about grief opened me up to being able to talk to her in a way that I considered spiritual, that I considered wasn't as therapeutic based connection, but more of the spiritual connection to something bigger than myself that doesn't really have answers, that doesn't make sense to the mind, but yet I feel deeply connected to her and her essence that's out there in the universe. So follow this thread of curiosity in your life and just notice where it takes you. Notice how it expands you. And you might not know where it's going right now. I didn't years ago when I was just feeling grief. But I started to then later, looking back, see that, wow, that curiosity entry point really opened me up. And this brings me to the second question here. This question of what experiences make you feel connected to something bigger than yourself? What experiences make you feel connected to something bigger than yourself? Is that being in nature, backpacking, looking up at the stars, spending time by the ocean, dipping your feet into the lake, music, meditation, love, grief, singing in community in general, travel, being in an airplane, science, silence. Maybe it's just being with one other person, holding their hand, cooking, sharing a meal with other people, dancing. What experiences make you feel connected to something bigger than yourself? And when you can name what makes you feel connected to something bigger, I welcome you to even get more curious about that. Like, what is it about watching the stars that makes you feel connected to something bigger? What is it about cooking a meal for other people that makes you feel connected to something bigger? What is it about dancing that makes you feel connected to something bigger? So getting even more curious about the essence of that experience, because it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else but you. For me, dancing, particularly dancing outside, is such a joy of mine to feel the elements of the air in my face and the fresh air in my lungs, and to just feel the beauty of nature around me and this like joy filled through me and movement and good music and hopefully laughter of other people and friends nearby me. Like all of that makes me feel connected to something bigger because it's pure bliss, it's pure joy that doesn't cost anything. And it's something we can create at any moment. And dance and being in nature and community are these simple pleasures of life that are so contagious, right? If you were to see a group of people outside dancing, there might be a part of you that wants to judge them, like, what are they doing? But then I'm sure there's another part of you that's like, wow, that looks really fun, or they're having a ball, they're in their own groove. And there's this sense of like shared humanity that we can tap into. Cooking for my family, for others, helps me feel connected to something bigger. Cooking for me is just this beautiful way of connecting to the fresh produce that comes from the earth. And it comes from the earth because of all the elements and the nutrients that are rich in the produce, and the hands that got to pick the produce, and the miles those produce traveled to get into my kitchen. And it's just really magical. Like all of the ways that food, the produce then gets to nourish my cells, my family cells. That is something that connects me to something bigger. Like, wow, the gift. I think in this day and age, specifically with how much we're knees deep into technology, spirituality is so important because it takes us out, it zooms us out of these micro worlds we've been living in, these Zoom screens or our email inboxes or all of the apps that we get consumed in, and the data and the noise. And spirituality zooms us out to the greater world that we live in, the greater whispers and wisdom. This brings me to my third question here is, can we be curious without needing certainty? So, can we allow ourselves to be curious about life without the certainty of the outcome, without the certainty of, yes, there's a God and they look like this? Like, can we be in the questioning of life? And this question used to be really hard for me because I would say, no, I need the certainty. I need to know that when I do this, I'm going to get this result. Like my brain needed that type of certainty. But what I've learned in my years and in the depths of my practice is life doesn't work like that. That just creates more suffering and struggle to think that if I control the specific inputs, that I'm going to get the exact outputs I need and want. And that's not how life magically works. And so what I've learned to do instead, when I've wanted to go get these answers, these concrete answers, and it feels very counterintuitive, but I've started to deepen into the uncertainty instead of the certainty. I've turned towards my spiritual practice in these moments of uncertainty to hold me in the uncertainty, to be with the uncertainty. So sometimes this looks like for me when I'm sitting in a meditation practice, I maybe will have a focused attention practice for 10, 15 minutes. And maybe for the last 5 minutes or so, I'll ask some questions. I'll sit in the wondering. And I remember when I had a coach years ago that kind of prompted me to bring this into my practice. I was like, this is BS. I'm just going to ask questions and like I'm going to hear something, like God's going to come talk to me. And it was very cynical. But it's really amazing what happens. What happens when we ask questions and just listen. And so we might not hear an answer to our question in that moment of asking it, but maybe we start to hear some whispers or some insights later that day or later that week or maybe a month later. And things start to make more sense. I don't know if I connect to the word prayer yet. And some of you listening might connect to the word prayer. The word prayer to me doesn't fully resonate. What I like to offer sometimes are just intentions. So sometimes I'll say to myself, may I be happy. May I have the strength to navigate this uncertainty. Or sometimes if I'm needing some external support, may you give me the strength to navigate this uncertainty. And sometimes I'll then offer in a little dialogue of sharing to spirit, this higher power, maybe something that I'm wishing for or wanting or hoping, or just even planting a seed like, I trust your timing. When this is ready, it will happen. And this practice of surrendering into the uncertainty and connecting to a higher power within me and around me has allowed me to also feel held. Like, I don't feel as alone. Life doesn't feel as scary in the uncertainty. I also start to see the ways that the universe has my back. The ways that things actually are meant to work out better than if I was to plan it perfectly. And staying in the curiosity of it all helps life feel a little bit more magical. It helps life feel a little lighter, a little bit more playful. So, this question of, can you be curious without needing the certainty? And I welcome you to sit with that and ask yourself, what could that even look like? Of how can you be more curious with the uncertainty of life? How do you want to welcome that curiosity into your practice? Whether that's in a meditation practice, in a journaling practice, while you're taking a walk, maybe while you're praying, however that gets to look for you. And this leads beautifully into the last question. What does it look like to experiment with spirituality? How do you want to play with spirituality in your life? There's no right or wrong answer here. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Maybe this is you practicing 10 minutes of silent meditation. Maybe this is you going on a walk once a day without headphones and just connecting to the sounds of life around you. Maybe this is taking your shoes off and putting your feet in the grass. Maybe for you, this is grabbing a journal and a pen, and instead of jotting down your present moment experience or your thoughts or the stories, maybe it's just asking a bunch of questions. It's leaning into your curiosity. Maybe you feel inspired to check out a spiritual or philosophical text, a book. Maybe it's listening to some music. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. So just have fun playing with it. Have fun listening to where your curiosity wants to explore and experiment. And notice for yourself, like, why does spirituality feel important to you? For me, it took a while to recognize that spirituality was something that was really important and missing in my life. And having it allows me to connect to this awe, this wonder. And I know there's some research out there that says that awe and wonder are even a more powerful emotion than gratitude. And so I welcome you just to play with, as you're noticing spirituality and what it looks like and feels like for you, the impact it starts to have on your life. Does it make you feel more connected? Does it make you feel more joyful, more easeful, more at peace, more inspired, more led, less ego? I can't wait to hear what comes alive for you. So feel free to reach out on Instagram at One Wade. Share with me your thoughts. You can send me an email linked in the show notes. And I welcome you to send this episode to somebody in your circle who you know is spiritually curious, who's maybe looking for some more guidance or more inspiration. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me into your ears, your heart, your mind. And until next time, stay centered.